our special someone, that we love them in our attempt to prove love. Who are you longing to prove that you love them? And what are you willing to do to show them your love? Love is a feeling. It's not an acquisition of things. It is not when you can sit here and say, I have more, look at me. I have more chocolate, more flowers, more love than everyone else. No, it is a feeling, and often it is how someone has treated us with kindness and compassion on this lovely day when we say, I love you. We wrestle with this passage today where God says, let me show you how much I love you, not by what he didn't do, but what our temptation is to hear that word temptation. And we always think it's about yes or no, of whether or not we should or shouldn't do. We think that as God listened into the story, that Jesus, Son of God, Son of Man, would be tempted like you and I. Yes, he is human flesh at this moment in our passage. And he encounters the evil one. Why? Because the Holy Spirit has led him into the wilderness. It's easy sometimes to take all the stories of Jesus being in the wilderness, tempted by the evil one, and blur them all together. But in the Gospel of Luke, we hear this, that Jesus was led into the wilderness by the Holy Spirit, for he was full of the Spirit, because he is indeed God. And together, they are in the wilderness. Why? Because that's where God will reveal God's self again to us. This story written for us. This story where we juggle between should we do this or should we do that? How can we prove we love someone? God gives us the story of everlasting love. When you and I hear the word temptation, we put it in today's context. We hear this word temptation, and it might be even tempting to think that this whole passage is about Jesus saying, well, I don't know, should I go this way or should I go that way? The devil always speaks first, and Jesus replies. Jesus is not waffling between the decision. Jesus knows what it will take to prove love, because his love conquers death. It is the evil one, the devil, that doesn't understand who God is, trying to trick God. Jesus uses the scriptures, this 40 days in the wilderness, reminding us of the 40 years that the Israelites, the children of God, were in the wilderness. Why? Because again, that is where they encounter God, where God reveals God's self to them and says, let us spend time together. Jesus, Son of Man, with human flesh, is indeed hungry, indeed thirsty, but without sin. Imagine if you were out in the wilderness for a day, 2 days, 3 days. Our beloved Lord is out there 40 days, and it says he was hungry. But he did not sin. The temptation comes from the evil one saying, hey, try this. And Jesus responds, love the Lord your God with your whole self. Do not put God to the test. How's that working for you and I today? God, if you love me, prove it. God, if you loved me, you would be with me. God, if you loved me, fill in the blank. God, it was God in those 40 days in the wilderness, and yet still felt hungry. You and I, when we're in the wilderness, on the journey, we still feel hunger, pain, loss, worry, fear. Because those are the things that bind us to this world. But God is God. Responds to the evil one, basically saying, enough. Now, as Lutherans, we don't like the word Satan. We don't like the word devil. In fact, when I was typing my message up today, I kept wanting to put a little D, to de-emphasize the evil one, because it makes me feel like if I give it any type of authority, it makes it real. Jesus encounters on our behalf real temptation, but unlike us, no waffling conquers this evil one. The story yet to continue, for almost like a cliffhanger, our story today will end by saying, and the evil one will come back at an opportune time. Not to tempt Jesus, but to tempt us. That when we see Jesus, when you and I would have been there, we too would have maybe seen his power, his authority. And instead of saying thank you, we'd say, who are you? Who are you to be gracious and kind? Who are you to heal the sick, the outcast? And in our fear, aligning with the evil one. What temptation, what hurt, what worry, what bother is on your heart today? God knows. And God says, let me show you how much I love you. Not with a stack of Valentines, not with a stack of chocolate or things of this earth. Let me show you I will take on even death. So as we hear this passage, when we are in the storyline of God's battle, proving God is always selfless, even in the thick of our self-centeredness, what is on your mind, your heart? And what are you trying to prove? To whom are you trying to prove that you love them? God says, I love you first. I love you always. My love conquers death. And in our passage today, we are invited to believe it to be true. So what's holding us back? What is it that you and I need to feel that we are valued, that we have worth? You know, children on this day when they're in classrooms, they give way to what is their favorite day of the year. No longer called Valentine's Day. In most schools, it's now called Friendship Day. And on a day when they are exchanging those little cards, a little stick of gum, a little piece of candy taped on a little card that says, hey, I know you and I like you, makes them beam all day long. Teachers will tell you it is a day that they look forward to all year long. But wait, this isn't the day where there's stacks of presents. This isn't the day when we are competing with how much can we give them in exchange. All they want is to know they have value, worth, the aching and the belonging to God, to something bigger than them. On this day when I too am reminded of my Lenten promise, my Lenten challenge, I realized when I made it, it was too large. I said, I'm going to get healthy. That was a little complicated. So then I narrowed it down and started doing so I won't eat this. And then I won't eat that. Okay, I narrowed it down even farther. And then I finally got to, I'm not going to eat chocolate. Interestingly, when I said this, what has happened is people keep trying to catch me. Catch me. And I'm sure you all mean it in positive and encouraging ways. But it's really hard on Valentine's Day. This is the best day for milk chocolate all around through the whole year. And instead, proving my love today is remembering who God is, and a lot less about me, and a lot more about God. On this day when I long just like you to know I have value, I struggle just like you to know if I have meaning. I struggle just like you to wonder if I have worth. And I'm tempted just like you to try and find worth, value in places that are contrary to what God has asked of me. To receive God's love. Today, as you walked in, you were given the opportunity to dip your fingers into the water. Again, not to rebaptize, but to remember who God is. If you have not been baptized, please know that the invitation is always for you. But we connect that baptismal font to the journey that God has given to us. God, again and again and again, saying, I love you. And our journey to believe it to be true. Today, when you taste the bread and the wine, know that on the night in which he was betrayed by who we are, by our inability to see that our worth comes only through God, to see that our job is to not only receive love, to be people of love, and to forgive with love. Be people with compassion and kindness. God says, let me show you again. With my own self. This passage, our journey, is about acknowledging God's selflessness in a world that is self-centered. And knowing we are free. Take the 40-day journey. If you haven't had a chance, there are little slips of paper in the back and on the table. And on that little slip of paper, you are challenged, not so that we will see, but so that you will write it down. What is it that you will do, not to prove to God, but to remember, to remind yourself each and every time you do something or you don't do something, what God has done, God's act in our lives. Take a cross. Again, not to put it in someone else's face, but to hold it and to remind you with your relationship that every time you put your hand in your pocket or in your wallet, you say, who am I in my relationship with God? Pick up a cross and journey with God. And in this 40 days, know that this journey begins with this story. You are loved. And that God will indeed do what God has always promised to do. Love God's people. Cherish God's people. Forgive God's people. And conquer death. For you and I. God is God. Our opportunity this 40 days is to give thanks.